This is Ubuntu Budgie 2004. I really liked the look and the setup, so I installed it into a virtual machine without even booting to the live desktop. I took the system defaults and used my own VirtualBox defaults, giving it 8 GB of RAM, 2 processor cores and a 30 GB virtual hard disk drive. The installation took about 5 to 6 minutes, typical for most Linux distros on my system. So I kicked back and enjoyed the slideshow that I've sped up here for brevity. After the installation was finished, I restarted and logged into the rather beautiful desktop, which is what appealed to me along with the general layout, although I'm not much of a GNOME fan. The welcome screen appeared, and this is where things started going a little sideways for me. Although it has a wealth of information and access to settings, I found myself a little bit lost and confused, as it seemed I was going around in circles somewhat as far as navigating between it, the Budgie desktop settings and the general system settings. More about that later on. The only time the welcome screen automatically ran was after the installation. I wanted to move this clock to the bottom right hand corner and resize it. It took me quite a while to figure out it's actually related to the top panel in the Budgie desktop settings. You have to remove the check mark from automatic before you can drag it around. I thought it was a desktop conky. Not very intuitive, but I got there. Adding applets to the top panel was easy, however some applets had no settings available and I couldn't configure them as I wanted them, such as the show desktop icon. I added the weather and managed to set it up to my liking, such as removing it from the actual desktop to just the panel. Very nice. I removed the show desktop icon as I wanted it near the menu icon, but couldn't get my own way. There's also plenty of other very interesting looking applets available. There's 2 virtual desktops out of the box and an easy to use switcher and tool for adding more in the top right hand collection of icons. A neat little notepad for jotting down ideas before you forget them, access to your home folders, a volume adjuster that moves in unusual increments, your power button choices, and access to the Raven sidebar, which we'll look at later on. Let's see if we can drag and drop a menu entry onto the blank dock. Yep, sure can. Not sure what's happening here, as the disks utility shows an EFI mounted partition, but the settings here show BIOS boot mode. Remember, this is a virtual machine. Whilst I can and have installed in EFI mode before, I took the defaults during the install and did not set up the actual virtual machine as a UEFI machine. Right-clicking the menu only works on some icons and then with limited options available. Does nothing on the clock. Left-click brings up options. In the file manager, you need to right-click up here to display the menu. This icon brings out the Raven panel. It shows notifications, calendar, volume and music. I couldn't see how to add other things to it or to customize it. Nothing to crow about really, but it is different and unique, and I get that. As I'm not very familiar with the Budgie desktop, I did spend some time on their website looking for how to drive the system. I couldn't really find the info I wanted, and ploughing through forums seemed like overkill just to get up and running. Mainly the desktop clock or showtime that I thought was a conky. As far as themes and layouts go, there was no real indication as to what theme and layout was the default to return to if I messed it all up. This also applied to system settings, Budgie desktop settings and the welcome screen, and trying to remember where I made a particular change from. Not a deal breaker, but somewhat frustrating and confusing, especially when I don't normally have much trouble with most distros. I did struggle with the uniqueness of Budgie and was a little put off at the amount of time spent trying to figure it all out. Maybe it's too much info and too many locations to make changes from. The lack of right-clicking to configure things and having to go into Settings panel to do so seems a bit tedious and clunky for me. One of those GNOME things perhaps. And then this happened. We kissed and made up. Frustrations aside, it's a gorgeous system, and now that I'm over the initial learning curve, I'm sure that I could learn to love it.